welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Noah, your favorite financial analyst, and I wanted to welcome all of you today to the fourth installment of Monologue Monday. This fourth installment of Monologue Monday is going to focus in on the topic of the financial game that we play here in the United States. Before I begin rambling, I did want to provide my greatest thank you to the individuals who are watching each of these Monologue Monday series. They provide great benefit for me personally, so I hope they provide a little bit of insight for you too. With that being said, let's get into the fourth episode of Monologue Monday. So, as stated previously, the topic for today is the financial game that we play here in the United States. So, the financial game. What do I mean essentially when I say the financial game? And this basically goes full circle. So, think of it this way: no matter what country you're in, you are part of their ecosystem, right? Part of their game. And in each game, as we know, there's different rules, there's different leaders, there's different cheat codes sometimes, right? And there's different ways to be advantageous, and there's other things that kind of put you back, and so on. So wherever you are in the on the earth here, you're going to be subject to the rules of a game, and there's different aspects to each of these games, right? And one of them happens to be finance, which is the topic that I'm going to hone in on in this video with some of my personal opinions on the matter. And I perhaps in future episodes I'll focus in on other aspects of the game that we'll play in different countries and so on. But for this episode, I want to focus in just on the financial aspect of the game here. So briefly, the way that I see the financial game, the financial path that we follow here in the United States is not, how should I put it? It's not ideal. And the way that I look at the financial game is that it's a aspect of the broader game, but it's really meant to keep you, the viewer, keep myself, and many other people pretty much spending and working for as long as possible. And this is the fuel that this aspect of the game needs to continue on, right? The game, the game itself doesn't want to be game over, right? It wants to continue, wants people to continue playing the game. And the way I think, this aspect of the game accomplishes this is, like I said, to keep people spending, to keep people working for as long as possible. Now, I haven't lived a entire lifetime, so I can't, I haven't reached the end game yet, but I have consumed, quite a bit of media, interviews, text literature, and just speaking with people that are quite a bit more senior than I am. And, I wanted to kind of articulate what they thought of this game, in terms of their opinion of it, right? And then using that to compare to my opinion to see if I was close, if my assumption was decently close, or if I was completely wrong. And thankfully, a lot of the individuals that I spoke with generally tended to agree with some of the things that I had to say regarding, this aspect of, this aspect of the game here in the United States. And one of these aspects, as I said, is to keep you spending. And I think a lot of people can kind of relate to this, but the cost, right? The cost to simply to play the game, right? Just to be around, to survive, to eat, to move about, to go to work and so on, is expensive just in itself. I made a video previously where I kind of showed a little bit of analysis of a individual's finances that lives here in Austin, who had a salary of $65,000, which is by no means a bad salary. But the consensus in that video, without going into great detail, is that the bulk majority, I think maybe 70%, of his expenses, of his total expenses, were tied up in essential expenses, meaning they needed to be paid, otherwise he is out of the game. He is, not eating, homeless, whatever, not receiving medical care, whatever it may be. But that's basically the reality, I think, for a lot of individuals that live here in the United States. Basically, the cost just to be around in this ecosystem is a huge chunk of the income that people have at at the end of each year. And we know that this doesn't change necessarily, right? There's certainly ups and downs, right? When you're younger, you're not really spending anything because the bill's being foot by your parents, right? And when you're a young adult, an adult, you're consuming all of the bills similar to how your parents did. And maybe later in life, some of those bills subside, but then other bills come into, make their way into your mailbox, right? Medical bills are absolutely huge. The biggest expense for individuals that are in retirement, I believe, but there's no escaping it, right? And this is the kind of the point that I'm trying to make is, even after, all of the work that you put in at different companies, whatever it may be, maybe it's one company, you will never really stop spending. And this is, like I said, this is part of the game that keeps it running. Is there's always going to be money coming out of your account, whether you like it or not. And that's just the way the game is designed. And sometimes it's not fair, right? Sometimes, like in, many games, there are accidents that are completely out of your control that can set you back, right? Another person, rolls a certain number, snake eyes, whatever it is, and they set you back 10 paces. And this is true in, in many economies as well, but it's very, very prevalent here, I think, in the United States, where you have a lot of people that work really hard to try to get ahead. And some freak accident, whether it may, whether it's in their control or not, happens, and it can be devastating, right? It'll send them back, years and years and years, and sometimes it can even be permanent damage, right? It's not just financial; it can be permanent damage. And those are really out of control of the individual, and that's what's very unfortunate with this too, is that you can end up having to pay for another person's actions. And like I said, this is going to happen in any country, so to speak, but it's very, I think, in my personal opinion, very prevalent here. We end up basically paying, for other individuals or one other person's mistakes, and it can be very costly sometimes. Another aspect to, the expenses never ending is that it is, in my opinion, a great deal of social pressure, especially now with how widespread and commonly used social media is, right? I don't think I need to explain what social media is. I think everybody knows what it is at this point. But the the pressure to have this, to have that, to have these items, to have these types of clothes, to have this type of house, they're endless. And I think the pressure really gets to a lot of people where they try to fulfill a mold of what other people, or what they think other people want to see, or what how they want to be viewed, rather, by other people. So they're constantly under this pressure to fit that mold. They're under pressure to pay for obviously the essential expenses in life, and those two combined is probably the reason, a culmination of the two is probably a reason um, a great many Americans are so-called check to check. So what happens, when you have a very high cost just to be here, and you also have these pressures to have certain things, to act a certain, or to eat a certain way, to live in a certain area. What happens is you generally don't make a sufficient amount of money, you and your spouse, or whatever it is, you individually, to cover all of that, plus have enough to put away, for a very, very nice retirement, or an early retirement, whatever it is. And what ends up happening is you need to stay in the workforce until I believe the retirement age for people my age is like 67, right? So you who are working for basically your whole life, right? All of the years that you're, at some of your best shape, you're going to be working. And I'm not opposed to working by any means, but putting into perspective the amount that it takes, right? The amount that you need to spend to fit the mold, to have, and just to be around, can really, really set you back from, having a not only a comfortable retirement, but a retirement that gives you some years of life left, right? I think a lot of people retire and they're finally out and about, right? They're finally not clocking in for work, they're not going to meetings and so on, but they're just not the same person that they used to be, right? Their mindset is different, their energy is different, mental health is probably different as well. So it gets to the point where you've completely you've lived your whole life working, and you're at a point right now where you can't even enjoy not working. So I think getting stuck in this game, right? And certainly there's aspects of this quote unquote game that are, how should we say, unescapable, right? You're gonna need most likely to pay for food and for certain things, and that's okay, as long as you do it in a relatively affordable way, considering your budget and your income and all these other things. Um, but there's a certain way that I think people should be playing the game, but I believe the majority are not. And the reason they're not is, as I stated earlier, you've got two things working against you. You've got the very high costs just to be around, right? Just to have your own apartment, to work, to get to work, to eat so you can work. All of those different things are absolutely essential, but their cost is very high. And then on top of that, you have the compounding costs of trying to enjoy life, a little bit, maybe having a little bit of travel in your life, a little bit of you know different friends and doing things with different friends and so on. But then on top of that, you have the pressures to have certain things, right? And I think a lot of people that I've talked to personally have a very, very difficult time pulling themselves away from that pressure, right? Being able to sit back and say, I don't really care, that I drive a car that's 20 years old. I don't care that my shoes aren't those ugly designer ones, right? I think a lot of people kind of struggle with this, and this is just how the game kind of works, where you're not forced to buy into it, right? Except for the essential stuff, but there's an immense amount of pressure to keep spending on these different things to have people perceive you in the way that you want to be perceived. So my consensus in this Monologue Monday is essentially that there is a game that you and I, that everybody here, we're playing together simultaneously, and you can either acknowledge that the game is set up in a certain way where if you don't do or you don't get into the right habits early on in life, if you don't recognize the red flags of this game, you can very easily be caught in it for a very, very long period of your life. And what would this essentially equate to? This would essentially equate to perhaps having a retirement that is already burnt out before you even start it, right? A retirement that's unfulfilling, right? The last thing I think people want to do in retirement is set up a budget. At least I don't. The whole point in having a budget, right, is to have a budget while you're, for the beginning of your life, to budget for the future. But if you budget now and in the future, what's the fucking point, right? So the game around us, right? It's here, and you're gonna play it whether you like it or not. And the best way to play the game is to have the proper education on different ways to avoid getting sucked into the traps of the game, right? The loot boxes of the game, right? The battle passes of the game, the temptations of the game. And part of the responsibility that I have towards my clients is to really kind of familiarize them with these avenues that can kind of steer them off course, right? That can really take away from that comfortable retirement, from that early retirement, perhaps. So I essentially try to talk them into, or reason with them, to pursue the smart path right away or early on in life, and that way you can basically kind of get out of the game as early as possible. So there you go. Now you know that you are playing a game with me and with everybody else. There's no way of escaping it. And the best thing that you can do right now is try to get ahead of it and then get out of the game as soon as possible. What do you think of the game that we're playing here in the United States? Let me know in the comment section below. With all that being said, if you have any questions for me personally, or if you'd like to take a look at the financial services that I can provide to you, I've left my email and my link to my company website in the description box below. As always, thank you so much for your time today, and happy financing.